You know, when you think about it, being a scientist is really not like any other profession. This has only dawned on me recently in that I'm responsible now for all the responsible conduct of research training here at the lab, and I do this many times a year for all of the undergraduate courses that we have here. We have 8 different ones. All of those inbreed partners come here and learn biomedical research skills. And so it's been in this learning how to talk with students about this that it's dawned on me that scientists don't really have any standards to which they are held by any particular authority or body. In other words, once you get your PhD, or say your master's, and you're going to work in a lab, you're good for go. I mean, you don't have to ever go back and take a course. You don't ever have to get a recertification like a teacher. There's no continuing medical education credits like there is for a doctor or for a dentist. I have a sister who's a paramedic, and I have a sister who's a trauma nurse, and you can bet that they have to like improve their skills all the time. But scientists, interestingly, think about it. So really, what is it that holds you to any standard that would guarantee that the work you're doing in your laboratory, and we're going to translate this to classroom here in a minute, is good work, is accurate work, is work that's done ethically? Where does the control come in? It's really only in terms of academics, I think, in one place. Who is it that has kind of oversight of your career and how well you're doing? It's your peers. Isn't that interesting? But it only happens if you get to the peer review level. So if you're not publishing papers, right? Although some of you who've worked in maybe more industrial type labs might be actually held to some certification of your lab that, you know, certain things have to be done, equipment has to be tested, equipment has to be calibrated, that kind of thing. So those kinds of requirements of, say, certified labs are what hold your feet to the fire there. But so when I'm talking to undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs that are going to go on to research careers, we need to have a serious talk because you have to have a lot of this internalized. How to do responsible research. And it's really your job as a scientist to train the next generation to work in the same way. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You know, because we are doing a citizen science project, I started to delve a little into, well, do all the same standards that apply to research scientists also apply to citizen scientists? Should citizen scientists be held to all the same standards as research scientists? Now, there are lots and lots of resources everywhere on responsible conduct of research for scientists. And there's a resource that we've put on the All About Arsenic website. It's a book called On Being a Scientist. There, I think there's a lot of good detail on, you know, what it means to be a responsible researcher. And when I posed this question to the group the other day on the webinar, one person responded, well, I think that if you asked a citizen scientist, do you want to be held to the same standards as a, like, real scientist or as any other scientific researcher? You know, I think they would want to. I think if you asked your students, do you want to be held to the same standards as any scientist who would be doing this work? And if they're that passionate, because they're that concerned about human health and everything, they might say yes. And so if that's the case, maybe we need to talk to them about, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And it's not that easy. Are you ready to work that hard? And what happens when you don't? You know, and how does that impact? Well, in your case, it might be your community. But when we're talking about other scientific research, it might impact entire fields of endeavor. It might impact human health. I mean, in your case, it could too, because that's the kind of project you're working on. So let's start with the citizen science an ethics piece and see where this leads us. So what I did was I printed out for you the 10 principles of citizen science, which is, published by the European Citizen Science Association, and I think that our organization hasn't tried to repeat it. They haven't tried to put out a US one because, this is good. And so this is the resource that you'll get. Are there more that can be passed around? And so actually I came to this, I really came to this after writing the grant, and after starting to put this workshop together. And it was interesting, as I read down these principles, I thought, this is what we're doing. And if in any place in our project we feel like this isn't what we're doing, let's explore why and how could we do it more like this. So the first principle, citizen science projects actively involve citizens in scientific endeavor that generates new knowledge or understanding. Check, right? I think that's what we're talking about and why it's going to seem important and relevant to students, right? So you don't engage citizens in scientific endeavors to generate old knowledge, like something we already know. It's, nothing that, you don't waste people's time when you're engaging them, and that makes you think about students and their time too, especially within the context of a project like this.
One thing that does happen in schools, and sometimes is called citizen science, is you generate knowledge that then, like other school science, is discarded at the end of it.
What a shame. There's a lot of real good science that gets done in schools and colleges and doesn't go anywhere, which is another reason why we invented anecdata.org. It was a place to put data, even if it's not enough to publish. And there's other sites like ours, depending on the project you're doing. If people are interested in doing bird research, I always send them to another citizen science portal called eBird. And people who are really doing species level monitoring, I will send them to iNaturalist. But if you're inventing a project from the ground up and you want to dictate what the variables are, then Anecdata is a solution. And there's others like Anecdata out there, but none that I think are trying to put the communication tools and civic action tools and moving data to action the way we're trying to do right now. 2, citizen science projects have a genuine science outcome. It informs something. It informs maybe management decisions or environmental policy. That's pretty pie in the sky. We'd be happy if it moved one family to filter their water, right? Both professional scientists and the citizen scientists benefit from taking part, right? So again, that's something to think about. Who's gaining here? Hopefully, both parties. Citizen scientists may, if they wish, participate in multiple stages of the scientific process. So in the early days of what we call citizen science here in the United States anyhow, I think there was a model of citizens collecting information, like observations of birds, that would be shared out with an organization that was in charge of the project, like Cornell. And then scientists would take that data and draw meaning from it, and maybe learn things about bird migration or population decline or something like that. But there's, I think, an evolving model of citizen science where there are multiple points of entry for the citizen, not just in the data collection, but maybe also in the data analysis, which is where, this is a place where really moving our students to understanding the data and being involved in the interpretation and maybe developing hypotheses and going down roads like Ruth Poland's students did when they were looking at different water pictures and that kind of thing. I think that meets this criteria too. Citizen scientists receive feedback from the project. So I have to say, there's a lot of citizen science projects out there, marine debris projects and others, where you will participate and you will collect that information, and either the cards get mailed to Augusta or the data gets entered into Ocean Conservancy website or something. But you don't necessarily know, so what came of all of that? And I think that's a point where citizen scientists do get to be frustrated when they're involved and they're putting in effort and they're not seeing what's coming out of it. And so I think it's important when we think about our projects that our students fully understand what it was that they just did and where it's going to go next. People need to know that. Citizen scientists deserve to receive feedback from the project. Citizen science is considered a research approach like any other, with limitations and biases that should be considered and should be controlled for. However, unlike traditional research approaches, citizen science provides opportunity for greater public engagement and democratization of science. Yeah, I like that term, democratization of science. Yeah, everyone's got some equal opportunity there to be involved and to be a scientist. So that's the one I might drill down on a little bit further and sort of give you some more traditional introduction to responsible conduct of research. But let's take another look. Citizen science project data and metadata are made publicly available, and where possible, results are published in an open access format. So that's interesting that the European Citizen Science Association calls that out, because boy, isn't that a problem. Citizen scientists are acknowledged in project results and publications. So, you know, I actually feel that citizen scientists can write papers, they can co-author papers. Certainly they need to be acknowledged, you know, in an acknowledgement section to the degree to which you can list every single person. I recently authored a book chapter for a textbook on marine citizen science, and I did manage to list absolutely everybody. So it was, the book editor wasn't sure that I didn't have too long of an acknowledgement section, but I was trying to honor that. Citizen science programs are evaluated for their scientific output, data quality, participant experience, and wider societal or policy impact. Wow. And by whom? That's an interesting question. We are fortunate that we have some evaluators that are going to be working with us on this project, and so see how I'm like, I think we're doing all these things. It's not so easy when you're just running your own little citizen science project out of your community lab to stop and, you know, be evaluating all along the way, but these are things I've been thinking about lately, you know.
So I do a lot of work. In fact, I'll be running another workshop outside of Rocky Mountain National Park in about 2 weeks. And it's a workshop for people who want to run citizen science programs. And it's amazing to me and disappointing how much this notion that a project ought to meet all of these sorts of objectives isn't self-evident to a lot of people running the projects. Either they just want the data, or in some cases, they just want to provide an experience for people that sort of looks like science, but they actually don't care about the data. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's, no.
Yeah, you know what, as I look at this, there's really not one you can ignore.
Right.
That's how I feel. Now, are there some that I have ignored in the past? Yes. Just like when I look back at my scientific career, are there things now I know about responsible conduct of research that I didn't know then? But we're all, you know, we're evolving and are thinking about these things. And then the last one.
Well, where I was going with that was that you have a funded project and you're able to pay Karen and me to do these things. But one of the things that and a lot of these folks are park interpreters or other people that are you know, really trying to do science in the parks for the public. And for a variety of reasons, because they're the federal government, they actually can't ask questions of anybody. It's really funny, but they can't actually do surveys of their own folks. But the point is that you have still internal means of trying to get these things, even if you don't have that. So, try.
Yes, your own internal review. For data quality, there's some things we can talk about. Participant experience. There are metrics that you can use, and it's always interesting to have students develop some of those metrics with you. And I'll tell you some stories from my work with kids and teachers that I had engaged in the phytoplankton monitoring over the years. And then, so last but not least, is that leaders of citizen science projects take into consideration the legal and ethical issues surrounding copyright, intellectual property, data sharing agreements, confidentiality, which I think is going to be one for us. And I think in some ways we're all project leaders. It's not just me and Anna, but once you engage your students, I think you become the classroom project leader. Maybe you'll have some students that rise up as leaders, which would be interesting, but they need to be on the same page with you and understand, what is their role as leader, and how is this thing called citizen science maybe supposed to work when it's at its best. Attribution, giving credit, and the environmental impact of any activities. I'll tell you what, I have used more plastic in trying to do good for the environment, right? When you look at some of the test kits and things and pipettes and on, I still feel like I'm doing better than when I was a research scientist and doing cell culture and generated more plastic waste in a day than I could stand anymore, because everything's in plastic. You don't sterilize glass petri dishes anymore, right? Or use glass pipettes that you wash and sterilize, which has its own environmental impact too. But I thought you might appreciate this because I think it's so holistic and might help you just think about some things that you can put into place. So another resource that,
So just this week, I have a son who's a junior in high school and was trying to write his lab report for his chemistry teacher.
Not to mention any names.
And was asked to, it was a density in soda lab, and was asked to find research that related to that, sources, and he was having a terrible time finding anything other than references to the lab he had done. It finally found something and was all excited about it, but then came to me asking, well, I'm not sure if I can use this. Why? He's much more savvy about the internet than I am, and so he had found I don't know the name of it, there's a website, some woman in Russia has published all kinds of journals, like the entire journal's backlog, everything, for free.
Oh, that's how he found it.
And he found it on this site. The site is safe to use, but is it ethical to use?
Because she shared it.
And I don't know enough about the site to know. I mean, say, no, you're not supposed, if it's a paid journal, at the same time you're a high school kid, you're not trying to make money, you're just trying to get your assignment done. It was the only one you could find. And so I said, you need to ask your teacher what to do with this, because it's a question. So that comes up for kids even, so it doesn't really, you look at the school's rules for, he can attribute the site, he can put, I can show where it came from, I'm not plagiarizing it, but can I use it?
He didn't steal it, but...
Right, well, he did sort of,
Exactly.
But he's also saying, I know most of my friends have all kinds of music on their, cloud, whatever, that is stuff they've gotten from places and haven't paid for. And so it's a big issue, I think, for high school kids when they start looking at this, because so many of these papers they want to see, you do have to be a member or pay way more than a high school kid is ever going to pay.
Yeah.
So when you start asking kids to do more real science, then all of a sudden, and our school doesn't have subscription rights to most of this stuff.
Most of your scientist mentors will, and so maybe that's
And so
a
maybe that's
relationship you can develop with them over time, and they can be helpful to you in getting you some key resources. I mean, I think if you overdid it and you asked them to do literature searches for you every week, it would be burdensome, but I think for key things that you really want to get a look at, you might be able to get some help.
So what his chemistry teacher came up with is, well, you see if you can find at least the abstract, because that's usually free, and maybe there's enough in that you can use the free abstract
Yes,
of the article
to cite the
to
paper.
cite what, you can, well, in the pirated one, you can cite the real article. I mean, it's got all the information there to cite it. It's just,
Yeah. this is
you
what
didn't
get.
pay for it.
Mhm.
Wait, now, at the beginning of my career, I used to take kids from Pittsfield up to UMO to spend a day in looking at microfiche, trying to find original sources that would help for their experiments they were going to do in the lab and spend 5 weeks doing. But anymore, we don't do that. We just go on the internet. But yeah, this becomes an issue then, because so many of the things they want are just not. So that's a good idea to use the mentors that way.
I have to say, in terms of commercial labs or certified labs, there's a thing that some of them do. They create what's called a quality assurance project plan. Are you aware of quality assurance project plans, or QAPs? And so because we do a lot of projects in collaboration with the state, and the DEP is very interested in our data, it was highly recommended that we have a quality assurance project plan for our community lab, and we do have one. And so the QAP outlines your protocols and how you're going to assure the quality of your data. And then, again, there's a lot of trust there that that is the document that you're living by. It's signed off on by DEP. And then if some of the data that you're collecting needs to be used in a court case or something like that, they can do that if you have this quality assurance project plan that's been approved and is in place. So I find it so interesting that other scientists don't have to have one. So, any of the other scientists here doing molecular biology and research in regenerative biology and aging, they don't have to have such a document because there's nobody they're reporting to that would require it. But the quality assurance project plan has details in it, like what temperature you'll keep your refrigerator at. And
I'm sorry, what temperature?
well, for the protocols that we're using, we need it at 4 degrees for our water samples. So we have a log on the refrigerator, and we check it every day. We have a thermometer and a pitcher of water, and we calibrate those thermometers annually. All this is stated so that any water samples that come in, are being held the way we say they're being held. We have incubators where we grow bacteria from water samples, and they have to be set at a certain temperature, and there's logs, and before any sample goes in there, you have to log in the temperature. So I have talked to teachers and students about how can you help to control the quality of your data. And I've had teachers invite their students to come up with ways to be sure that they're not making any mistakes. And I had a middle school, it was actually Tremont School, that whenever they went out to do their water monitoring, they had their protocols on cards that hung around their necks. And they were upside down, so they could do that, pull them up and read them. I had others that actually wanted the protocols facing the other way, so they'd have a partner that would be standing there looking over their shoulder while they were doing things, and then the partner was handing them things. And so the students were deciding, how can I assure, or making the decision that after I count the number of phytoplankton on this field of view, another student will come behind me and do the count too. And now we have 2 people that say there's X number of these toxic. It's more time consuming to put these things in place, but it assures the quality of your data.